Gardens is nice if you like that sort of thing, like fresh air,
Mhm.
sunshine, beautiful landscapes, parks, walking,
Yeah.
friendly. If you
Mhm.
like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And QE parking in Vancouver is really nice too.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's session. We are at the top of the hour. So today's session, first off, I want to thank Mark again for doing all of the hard yards, putting everything together, collating, collecting, and putting it up on the OC Callers website, acting as the host with all the material. And welcome to Jeff, who is there, and all of the callers, new, experienced, journeyman, and long in the tooth like myself for coming in. Your presence is always welcome. Today, I decided to go a little bit different. The topic for today is just how hard can it be? And this is solely about new music and new choreography, but I'm taking a slightly different perspective on this. And the perspective I'm taking is comments that came from dancer perspective, dancer perception, dancer questions. And are we aware of this as a caller? And do we actually know how to answer these questions as a caller? And so I put this little thing. If you've got two dancers in a room and pretend what you're calling your tip is a cell and they're looking through the bars, are they looking up at the stars or are they looking down on the ground? It actually rhymes better the way it's written. I should have said it that way. But that's the perception, and that's the keys that I want to look at and address today. Okay, so the following, it's a post from Facebook on the Square Dance Callers page from a lady named Tina Davis Wilkins. And she essentially asked 4 separate questions. That was all sort of rolled into one, but it's 4 separate questions regarding the use of music and choreography that's done today in square dancing. And these questions, although they're general in nature, they posited something that all callers should be considering and that all dancers should be aware of. And that is the 2 topics of new music, what it is, and different choreography. And what does that actually mean? And these are the things which all callers should be working towards. But the reasoning behind why we use a lot of older tunes, older music, and reused choreography is something that most dancers are completely unaware of. And this is why she asked the question, well, just how hard can it be? And we'll go into the details of exactly what her questions are. So today's session was prompted by the dancer. And in this session, I not only want to address the questions and provoke some discussion on the topic to get us thinking about calling once again, but thinking about it from the dancer perception rather than that of what we do all the time, and that's callers at the technical perception. So the best way of doing that is just to summarize. I'm not going to put all the comments, but summarize what the question was, and some of the other callers and some very good, well-renowned callers responded, which I'm very happy with. So Tina wrote, I'm not a caller, just a low-level dancer, but I feel that most clubs and groups today are making false promises. Everyone says updated music, modern music, various types of music, etc. And the club callers may update some pattern music, but in her perspective, the singing calls are older than she is, and many callers have been singing those same singing calls for decades. Some callers even do the same choreographic figure to many different songs. And we'll talk about that one in a minute. In other cases, she knows that choreography, she'll know what the choreography is before they start calling, because whenever they play that song, they will always use exactly the same figure. And she knows those songs by heart because it's just like song lyrics now. Okay. Everybody says that square dancing is dying. She says she's joined many clubs and groups in her area that have new classes and new graduate dancers. And what she's seeing is experienced dancers are going away, either up to a different program or they're just leaving the activity. But there is a big surge in new dancers that are leaving because, quite frankly, they're getting tired of dancing the same routines. It may be different music, but it's the same routines. Okay. And her question is, shouldn't we try to keep them interested and excited to be part of this international family? So she posed these 4 questions. 1, how hard is it to learn a new tune? Is obtaining new music expensive or is it difficult to learn? 3, if the same choreography works for multiple songs, shouldn't it work for newer songs just as well? And how hard is it to learn some new choreography or new routines? So honestly, as a new dancer, and this is her words, for the record, I'm 50 years old, this is her, and I've danced 16 years, and she still considers herself a new dancer. But her parents have danced so long that she was dragged along to dancers for most of her youth, and she judges callers based on their pattern music as well as their song. And I thought that was an interesting point because she judges callers on their pattern music as well as their singing calls, not so much the choreography, but the choreography was a big part of her question. So she also went on to write, if you play your pattern music, and this is what she's talking about, like Popcorn or Baby Elephant Walk, or repeat other pattern music and then sing those same tired old songs with the same figure that you've used for 20 years, you can forget me to come to a paying dance. And there's a lot of her friends and a lot of new dancers that feel exactly the same way. You do not have to be a great singer, but if your music's good and your choreography is smooth, she'll go to that dance. And she's also said that she accepts that many older dancers often like older music because they can relate to it. You know, it's the music they were listening to when they were young. But she's looking at new dancers' sustainability, you know, like Don Williams and Buck Owens. Well, Don Williams was 1970, Buck Owens was the 1960s. They're fine and they're good to dance to sometimes. Her favorite artist, she says, is Waylon Jennings, which is the 1960s through the 1980s. But even at her age of 50, she prefers more up-to-date music, say 2000 and forward. So that's the generality of her questions and her comments. And there were some really good responses, so I've summarized most of them here. Oops, let's go. Okay, I'm just going to read through this. We as callers can't buy music. These aren't mine. These are from the responses that were given to Tina. We as callers can't buy music that doesn't exist for what we do. Music producers are doing their best, but not all new music is amenable or able to be changed in format to meet the needs for singing call structure and still be anywhere close to the original song. Most of our music producers are not under 30 years of age, and thus most, given the chance, would produce the kind of music that appeals to them personally. And therein lies the conundrum. Learning new singing calls, if the music doesn't touch you, okay, most callers aren't going to learn a new singing call if they don't understand music. Or if it isn't a song that the callers heard before, like we were talking today, Weave the Sunshine, if they've never heard it, a song means a monetary commitment and a commitment of time and work. And if they haven't heard the song, chances are they're not going to listen to it if they don't know what the original is like. Some callers wrote, I simply pass on songs because I haven't heard the original. There are others songs that have been so popular with dancers that other callers do. I felt an obligation just to the dancer happiness to get that song and learn it. There's a lot of factors that come into play when selecting music. The cost is also a significant factor. Consider an evening dance with a new piece of music for each tip, each patter, each singing call. One patter and one singing call per tip at about $10 each. You do an average of 8 tips a night. That's $160 a night in music costs alone. That being said, some pattern music can be a little less expensive. Some singing calls can be a little less expensive. And the caller doesn't need to get new music for every dance, but getting new songs, 1 or 2 new songs for each dance can be expensive, especially compared to what callers get paid today. Also, it can certainly be hard for a caller to learn new music. I wish it was as simple as I can buy a song and sing it well enough for the dancers to dance to it right from the start. However, as Yolanda demonstrated, it takes quite a while to get some songs down, and some songs are just not within the caller's range. So some of this new music has to get left aside, especially when we start talking about digitally enhanced music or popular singers like Nicki Minaj or that. Well, I would never call this one, you know, that's not even singing in my book, but that's just my personal preference. One suggestion that a caller made is to have a music donation jar at their dance so they can donate for the caller to get new music. This is in addition to, you know, you pay your normal club fees to go to the dance, but you put a tip jar, basically like the old piano player's tip jar. Most callers just barely break even when they call dances, especially after you consider the mileage and the other costs. But unless they've been calling regularly, or at least 2 nights a week for a club that picks up the expenses, most callers today are actually calling it a financial loss. So you have to take this into perspective that, did I miss a flip here? No. Okay. When you put this into perspective, an average spend is between $200 and $100 to $300 on new music per year. About 80% of that goes into singing calls. Some callers wrote that they try to find a mix of music with different eclectic, new, as in post 2000, but also some old classics if they're good, and the new releases that are true to the old popular versions of the song. One wrote, I'm also limited by songs that fit my vocal range because I don't know how to change that with all those computer programs today and still make the music sound good. One of the biggest thing that came from most callers is music production costs. To buy the mechanical rights, that's the right to record and sell songs, is horribly expensive for any songs that are younger than 10 to 20 years right now. Square dancing is such a small market of dance music, and there's only so many callers out there that are actually buying music. Square dance music producers can't really afford to pay much and still keep the music affordable. And what the result is unless there's a specific song that has touched the music producer that they want to produce, or there's a caller out there that wants to front up the large expenses to produce that piece of music as a square dance and pay all the copyright and production costs, we generally end up with just the older songs available. But you remember, music doesn't have to be modern, but it is essential that it has different rhythms and different styles. You also have to consider the purchase cost versus reality. Today, a new singing call costs about $10 American. Some are $6, some are more. The caller calling for a tiny club or a new caller is lucky to make $50 an evening. So basically what you're saying is one record, one new song is about 20% of that calling income per night. With regard to choreography, most choreography is interchangeable, but that comes with experience. And with experience, it becomes easier. And with training, it becomes more knowledge. With training becomes knowledge, or comes knowledge. I can say that if I had to call only to the old music, I would not be calling. Variety is the spice of life, and musically, both musically and choreographically. So as you can see, while these are all caller responses, most callers immediately, you might have noticed that, went on the defensive about the music they use, why they choose it, and the cost. What I found interesting is although the questions posed were about choreography and music, and they were equally based, there was very little response on choreography. And that's because the technicalities of choreography are discussed amongst callers. Most don't want to get into that to try and explain the technicalities to dancers. But those comments can be summed up fairly easily. With regard to choreography, most choreography is interchangeable, but that comes with experience. With experience, it becomes easier. With training, it becomes easier. And with more knowledge, it becomes easier. And like I said, some callers said, if I had to call the same old stuff over and over, I wouldn't be calling today. It's all about variety. Okay. So that was a sample of all the comments in response to Tina's questions. And yes, they were very good questions. And there's something not often considered by the dancer on the floor, but they're also something not often considered by the caller. But from a dancer perspective, the dancer is just trying to enjoy an evening of dancing and social fun. And that's what we need to focus on. So let's have a look at those questions in detail. Let's talk music first. Excuse me, my throat's getting dry. Music is an issue, but it has been touched upon, but music does not have to be the most recent top 10 hits on the chart. It doesn't have to have it doesn't have to be, you know, hard driving rap music or all this or all the brand new country songs. What it does need, however, is to have variety in both style, rhythm, and importantly, the caller's presentation. And the latter is the most important one of those, believe it or not. That's presentation. A good older song that's relatable and enjoyed by all ages from say 10 to 90 would be infinitely better than the #1 top 10 song or the #1 song on the charts today that is poorly presented and has lost the essence of the song due to it being reformatted for square dance danceability. I use the following examples. Ghost Riders in the Sky. You know, I do that. That's got that deep bass country rhythm. Boom, 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 boom. Dancers love it. They sing to it. They get really energized by it. That was 1948, repopularized in 79 by Johnny Cash. That can lift the floor and have everybody singing along. Here in Australia, the first time I played the song Rocky Top, the whole mood of the floor lifted because that, for some reason, I still don't know it, is a very special popular song in Rocky Top, and they're into the stomping of the floor and boom, and it caught me off guard. That's 1967, but here it's always a hit. Doesn't matter who does it. There's other songs like Piano Man, that's Billy Joel in 1973, or Neon Moon by Brooks and Dunn in 1992. Those are the popular soft pop, very nice melody lines. You've got to be able to sing to get them off, and everybody knows those songs and everybody loves those songs. They have been reformatted to fit square dancing, and they fit very well. Hallelujah or Desperado, or some people call it the theme from Shrek, Hallelujah. Okay, that's Leonard Cohen. You'd never think of Leonard Cohen music as a square dance song, but you know, that's 1984. Desperado, you know, that's that's the Eagles, 1973. These are all old songs, but they've been remade and repopularized. And then you've got things like jazz and show tunes. Razzmatazz, love that old jazz, 1950s. And that was actually that type of music, the scat and the ragtime, we're going back well before the Second World War. Frank Sinatra songs, almost always popular. That's 1950 to 1980, New York, New York, and all of those kinds of songs. What the essence here is, all of these songs represent a mix of both style and rhythm that can enhance an evening. They can control a mood in a positive way. They can take the dance into new directions and new feelings and sentiments, but they all take time and practice to deliver a polished and enjoyable performance for the dancers. So for me, when I hear a piece of newer music, post-2000 era, I'm talking about music that inspires me and inspires the dancers. If I hear it and it's recorded nice and I can feel I can do it, I will get it. And I like to listen to a lot of new music, but there's a lot of stuff out there I won't do because I just can't. So there's a second issue, redundancy versus cost. All callers tend to use the same pattern singing calls today for each show. And when they do that, it doesn't tend to retain the dancers. A caller that uses the same pattern and the same singing call for one dance will definitely not retain dancers. There are anecdotal histories of callers that only had one pattern record and they called their entire dance. That was days gone by. That does not work today. Dancers actually tune into the music as much as they do the choreography. They don't care about the choreography as long as it's smooth and flowing to dance, but they do tune into the music. And most callers that have been calling in the area of about 5 years or more are going to have a library of about 50 patterns, 10 of which are going to be their favorite ones. And they're also going to have a library of between 100 and 200 singing calls. After that time, they realize that calling is actually an expensive habit. They have more experience. They're more comfortable with their vocal ranges and selectivity. Callers, after about 5 years, tend to get a little more selective about the type of music they choose. Before that, it's anything that's popular. Oh, that's my favorite caller. I'm going to get his records. I'm going to, you know, that kind of stuff. Nevertheless, even with that limited amount of music, you've got a lot of mix and match styles and a lot of mix and match rhythms to make a fairly effective evening for programming. However, consider that if a caller were a club caller calling and teaching one night a week, 8 tips a night on average for 40 weeks of the year, that's 320 singing calls. That means, of course, some of your singing calls are going to get repeated because they're popular. People like them. It also means that the musical outlay for a year is about $3,200 if you're going to do that. And that does not include the average $3,000 to $5,000 you've already spent on equipment and various other things. It doesn't include the travel and it doesn't include your time. So the return on this is about $50 an evening on the low end, $100 an evening on the average end. Some callers make more, some callers make less. But if we look at it as, say, let's just round it to $100 per evening, I wish. That means a new caller who actually starts calling will not actually start making any money or the break-even point until about year 5 if they become a club caller at one night a week. And at that point, they will have spent about $7,500 in equipment and music. Now, there's no calculations for time, caller schools, travel, etc. It's going to take them another 2 years just to break that even point. So this is essentially a labor of love. Needless to say, most callers today say they spend between $100 and $300 per year updating their music. And another aspect of this is time. All that time is not spent on learning a song. That's never calculated. The way much music is recorded today is they generally have to unlearn the original song and relearn the square dance version of the song. They've got to relearn key lines of the song so they don't mix it up with the original song. And they have to learn choreography, which may change every time, hopefully anyway. Every time the song is performed, you get a slight change. Consider that every hour for a tradesman level caller, that's where I put myself as the tradesman level, is about 2 hours work and practice and preparation before going out to perform. That doesn't even take into account the weeks of practice putting into a performance of a new song. Yolanda gave us a presentation of a song she's been working on. First time I heard that when she was doing that was about 8 weeks ago, and she's working on it. She's getting ready to perform it. And I know Yolanda puts a lot of time and practice into her songs. Okay. The average time to learn a singing call is 6 hours. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but that is to learn it and get it and master it. That's 100 times through the record. 4 minutes is the average length of a singing call, about 100 times, sometimes less, sometimes even more, just to get it to that preparation. That sounds 6 weeks, but that's 6 weeks over several weeks or several months. Now we've got availability versus cost. Many, in fact, most of our more popular songs are from the 1980s and 1990s that are becoming available today. Noted already, there's a few music producers that are able to produce really good high quality versions of that song. I know Bob Elling and I know Tracy Brown. They've collected a lot of the older labels and they're digitally remastering them to keep some of these older, more popular songs on the list. And I've been helping record some of those out. Don't get paid for it, don't do it. I just do that as a labor of love because there's a lot of really good music that we don't want to lose. But you have to consider that in the 1980s, a new song would perhaps sell on the low end 1,000 or more records. The real popular ones, even more. I remember going to a convention in Germany, and they had a whole center display. There must have been about 20,000 records laid out for callers to go through and various turntables with headsets to go through. And some of the more popular records like the Rhythm and the Royal Record labels, they would get 100 copies of these and callers would try to get there first because those 100 copies are going to be sold out in about 20 minutes. That's long gone. If that was going on today, producers could afford to spend more than the $3,000 to $4,000 that it takes to produce a good piece of music. Those hiring costs for studio musicians, if you're doing it really, really high quality, you're talking another $5,000 to $6,000 in cost with really quality recording and multiple takes and everything else to get it right. Today, much of the music developed is electronic based and it's released electronically. This brings down the cost significantly, but it's still an outlay of about $2,000 or more to produce a piece of music when you add all the production costs in. And these songs are being sold for $7 to $10 each. That doesn't sound like a lot, but consider today a good sale of a song is around 100 copies or 100 pieces of music, as opposed to the thousands in the 1980s. In addition, today there's a lot of karaoke callers, which basically get a song, they'll strip the vocals, or in some cases, they don't even strip the vocals off the music, and they just take that piece of music because it's popular and they call over it. I have yet to hear more than 10 pieces of music that actually works for because they don't format it. They sacrifice the dance rhythms and the style and the enjoyment of the dancers being able to dance just for the sake of having a new piece of modern music And essentially all they're doing is calling a patter and putting some extra lyrics on the end, but it's not that danceable to the beat. It's not there. Music producers have to be selective. And that's why there's fewer of them making music. Many do it mainly because it is a labor of love and they love the activity. And like callers, a lot of them pay out of their own pocket just to present this craft. And breaking even today is more of a goal than actually making money at something. If they can at least have it that it pays for itself, they're happy. There's not a lot of money made in this anymore. So that's the average of the music explanation how hard can it be to get a new piece of music? Well, it's actually quite hard because there's a lot that goes into one record. It's not just, I like that song, I'm going to call it as a square dance. And a lot of these karaoke callers that strip the vocals down and just use it because they recognize the music, it sounds good at the start. But once you start being a good, passionate dancer that wants danceable beat, danceable choreography, and the real feeling, you got to be a true artist to be able to do that. And if you are doing it, have you paid the copyright? Have you paid the musical production fees? Have you paid this? Chances are no. And that's a whole new ballgame. Okay, the second part of Tina's questions were about choreography. And mainly it was about the caller's use of choreography. Variable choreography in singing calls is quite common today amongst callers. I know some callers that they say they never use the same figure twice in a singing call. Other callers like to sight call their singing calls, so everything is different all the time. I can tell you right now, many dancers do not like this. Other dancers, however, particularly at higher levels, do like this. They like their dancing only for the technical challenge of the dancing. Okay. Most dancers say they want new and different routines for the songs, but not each figure in the song. It seems like a very difficult balance to find. Others like variety, but in truth, calling like this makes it more about how clever the caller can be and how can the caller show off their abilities rather than the enjoyment of the dancers. And that is, I would take that as an axiom, at least through plus. Different regional areas might have slightly different callers may have a difference because that's the way they taught their club and that's all they know. But on average, dancers want variety. They want change, just not every time in a singing call. And they want the singing call to have a reason. Doing this different, everything's different. It also sets a very bad example and an unrealistic achievement goal for new callers that are just learning the art. It's also hard on the dancers, and many dancers describe a lot of these every figure different singing calls as just another patter, but this one's got song lyrics. Instead of do the right and left grand, every other girl and every other hand, meet your girl and promenade, or promenade home like an upbeat groom and a bow-legged bride, take her back home, get side by side, and when you're there, head square through. Well, all you're doing is just changing the pattern to song lyrics. It's not a relaxing singing call. For me personally, I will use only a maximum of 2 figures in a song. If I've done a workshop or something with a specific choreographic figure, I'll use 1 figure, because that's my choreographic focus. And I'll repeat that figure 4 times in the singing call because it ties in with my pattern. I'll use 2 if I'm just having a relaxing play for a type of dance, or I'm at a convention and I've got 2 relatively easier figures. They're not easy, but they're danceable, and they're not going to really make that dancer sweat, but they're going to interest them with the variety. That said, what Tina has stated is a very common problem today, and it's summarized in what I consider 2 phases. One is the same choreography is used for the same songs always. That becomes rote memory. That song has those lyrics, and that's what's done to it. That's it. Well, that tells me that that song has lyrics. It doesn't have choreography. And the second part is the same choreography is used for different songs too often. So let's look at this briefly and see why this happens. To understand that, we have to look at the structure of singing calls. Okay, most singing calls today, I'd say probably about 99.9%, have 7 64-beat phrases that consist of an opener, a break, a closer, and 4 figures. And because of that structure, it should be relatively easy to pull any 64-beat singing call from any other singing call and get lots of variety, right? Much of the music today has the same figure on it for 20 different songs. So it must be okay to use that same figure many times in a night, right? Well, we all know with experience, that answer or that approach is wrong, very wrong. Music structure for square dancing is usually and generally rigid, 7 times 64-beat phrases. But like all music, all lyrics and words, all the lyrics and all the words of every song do not fit from one song to another song. Well, this applies to square dancing as well. All the choreography that fits from one song does not fit to another song. Despite this, many callers try, and what they've ended up doing is taking some pat figures. What I call a pat figure is a standard figure that will always be there, that will fit into almost any song, and their variety then becomes very limited. Secondly, it's important to when we talk about pat figures, during the heyday of square dance music production, we're talking the early 80s, which is where most of our music still rests. Music producers made music for callers. I had a discussion with Tony Oxendine a while ago, quite a while ago, actually, it's about 20 years ago. And he said in the early 90s, Royal had about 4 to 6 singing call figures. That's it. And if you go through their music back then, they generally used those 4 to 6 figures to fit most of the songs. This was done to give the callers that needed it an idea of how the song was intended to sound. But as Tony said, music producers were not trying to sell choreography. They were trying to sell square dance music that was danceable and fun to dance to. Callers were expected to provide their own choreography for the music. Some did, some didn't. To bring this into the fore, it was pointed out at an Australian festival not too many years ago, and this was pointed out by a very well-respected Australian caller teacher, mentor, somebody that's really into developing new callers. In one evening portion of a dance that was 3 hours or, 3 hours, about 12 brackets or 12 tips. There were 14 singing calls done because there's 3 done in the last tip. 8 of those figures opened with a grand square. Not a big problem. And that's so the callers could show off. It's a festival. That's fine. 9 of the tips started with a figure that started and ended with a promenade. Okay, that meant that 1/3 of that evening, in fact, 1/3 of all those singing calls, 144 beats of 448 beats in a singing call, is taken up by promenading. So 1/3 of the evening, you just said, take your partner and walk around the floor. Okay. It was also noted similarly in the US by a US caller that on one Saturday, and this was from one of his presentations, in the mainstream hall, there was 4 hours in the afternoon and 3 hours in the evening. That equated to a total of 36 tips being called. There were 36 singing calls being done. I'm assuming he's not including the tag tip or the end tip of the evening. This is what was noted. Of 36 tips over a full day, 22 of them used the grand square. That's a lot. 15 of them used this figure: head, square through, do-si-do, swing through, spin the top, right and left through, square through 3. 15 out of 36. That's over half the tips of the evening used that figure. 7 of them used the figure head, square through, do-si-do, swing through, boys run, bend the line, right and left through, flutter wheel, slide through. And 5 used the figure heads, promenade halfway, square through 4, swing through, boys run, or right and left through veer left, Ferris wheel, center square through 3. Now, when you think about that, that's 15 and 7 is 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 27 tips. Out of 36 tips, that leaves 9 tips only where a different figure was used. Okay, that's to me the epitome of missed opportunity. Okay, what it means in the first case in Australia at these particular dances, because it was so much the same, dancers didn't really stick around to the end of the dance. You may have had 20 tips on the floor at the start. You've got less than half of that for the last tip of the evening. And the same thing happened in the US. the end of the evening dance, less than half of who was in attendance at the US dance wasn't even there for the last big windup because, you know, they just basically had enough. It was a good dance. They were good performances. It was just the same thing over and over. So even though it may be different performances, that choreography and that redundancy of choreography does matter to the dancers. Okay. I know singing call is supposed to be to relax, but dancers do know very quickly if they're going to be dancing that same figure repeatedly in the singing call, and especially more so if it's not connected to some way with interest to the pattern. They've had enough. They don't want it. With regard to interchanging figures is a process that takes practice and skill. And if you're just trying to take a figure out of one piece of music and force it into another, some will work, such as those 3 figures that we noted above. They fit into just about anything, but others don't. Now, this is not because of the choreography itself. It's 64 beats. It's 64 beats. It should work. The reason it doesn't fit is because the rhythms and the instrumentation of the song must be conducive to the performance of that song. Okay? You've got to be able to fit it. You're not singing the calls per se, but your voice is an instrumental piece. It's an instrumental tool. Your voice is a melody line that has to work in there. And your voice is part of that instrumentation. And if it doesn't fit in the rhythms, delivering those calls, it's not going to work.
I'm just going to keep asking airlines if they can try and get us off today. It's going to be way worse tomorrow.
Okay, I'm getting some feedback from somebody there.
On a resort, on the beach.
Anybody else getting that feedback?
Yes.
I don't.
I think it's happening.
Yes.
Okay. If you're not muted, if it's coming from you, if you could just mute yourself. Okay. As I was saying, it's not the choreography, it's the rhythms and the instrumentation of the song that have to be conducive to the performance. Callers, you need to learn and study in detail your music. Like song lyrics, square dance choreography has to be delivered to match the rhythm of the music, but it has to match the rhythm differently than song lyrics. So it has to match the rhythm before the beat so that you can deliver the words so they can dance on the beat. It's not sung, but it's called in the rhythm, and it's delivered almost as a separate instrumental melody line to the rhythms to that piece of music. And that is a skill that takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to develop. Add to this that the caller also has to allow for the execution of the movement, then fit that command call in at the right time. These are what we call the timing issues. There's lead time, there's command time, there's execution. Lead time, how far ahead do I have to give this command so the dancers can stay on the beat? Command, how long does it take to say this word? Square through, 2 beats. Spin, chain, and exchange the gears, 4 beats, maybe 6, depending on what your delivery is. How far ahead do you have to give that in the previous movement to do that in order so that they can execute or dance the number of steps required to perform that movement at the right time? This added dimension precludes many written singing call figures from just being transferred from one song to another. Nevertheless, callers can, with practice and experience, identify a lot of them that are able to transfer. Okay, so let's just consider, I've just chosen 4 singing call figures at random. Well, not exactly random. You might recognize a couple of these. The first one, heads promenade and go halfway, walk in and square through, get 4 now, go all the way, swing through and bend, boys run, Ferris wheel now, center square through, go 3 hands around, swing that corner girl and you all promenade. That's one of my pat figures. I call that a pat figure because I will use that figure to test a song. That will pretty much fit into every piece of music. Okay. The second one, very similar. For more upbeat and punchy songs, head square through, do side do, touch a quarter, scoot back, boys run, right and left through, flutter wheel, reverse flutter wheel, keeper promenade. Okay, that will pretty much fit into every kind of punchy piece of music. So I'll use both of those figures to see if they work. When we get to the third one, okay, the second one is very flexible and it'll fit in with even those strong instrumental melody lines. The third one, it has expressions and nuances in such things as cast off 3/4 followed by the Dixie style. This limits it to songs that have a good steady rhythm, but not an overly dominant instrumental. In this case, the caller would have to use that music very, very wisely, okay? Because it's a lot, but it's a nice, beautiful, danceable figure. In the fourth instance, although not difficult to dance, it's got some nuances to it. Heads lead right, circle to a line. Left, touch a quarter, boys run to a left hand wave. Girls start, swing through. Girls circulate, boys trade, boys run. Couples circulate, bend the line, pass through, ends fold, swing your corner and promenade.
Mel,
Okay. Yes.
if I may interrupt, on that last figure, the ends fold is for one part good for the body flow, for the other one's not. If the left-hand dancer, whatever that would be, would fold, then you would have a nice swing and promenade.
Yeah. And that in this case, it was ends fold because we've got an odd looking, we could have said boys fold, we could have done girls fold. It could have been ideally boys, and you're right. But in boys fold, swing your corner.
Because one end from the right end dancer from the line, he folds to the left and then swings right. That's just not.
And the other one is a left. And
Right.
Absolutely. In fact, good catch.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm just correcting that on the, let's go boys fold. Yeah. That way it'll be corrected in the notes that go with this presentation. Okay. In this instance though, because of the left-hand wave, the center starts swing through the lot, and there's a lot of choreography in there. It's short, girls circulate, boys trade, boys run. You're delivering some of these 2-beat things in 1 beat. Everything is 2-beat commands, pretty much. Heads lead right, circle to a line, left touch a quarter, boys run, make a left-hand wave, girls start, swing through, girls circulate, boys trade, 2-beat commands, and there's a lot of them in there for these movements, okay? This means the dancer has to be able to dance and react to the music and the calls, because there's very little room for error in this. For the caller, this type of choreography means that the music must have a good rhythm and a good beat, but the instrumental in the singing call needs to be quite a lot more passive, and the caller is going to be using his or her calling as the instrumental melody line through which the figure develops. Okay, that choreography, this piece here, cannot just be picked up and put into any song. It takes work to develop this kind of stuff. But it's overall, if you look at all of these figures together, this type of choreography and variety is needed by the dancers to keep them interested and challenged, but not all the time. I would never do all 4 of these figures in, I would never do all 4 of those singing calls, 4 of those figures in a single singing call. This one,
Sir?
I might do these 2. I might do this one by itself, or I might do this one and I'd repeat that 4 times. You had a comment, Mickey?
Yeah, sorry, I found another one. In the third figure, you have the boy run and girls trade, which is in the center, right?
Yeah.
And then you have cast off 3/4. This means the girls, because they're activated, would have to do another cast off 3/4, but you want everybody to do the cast off 3/4, so there has to be everybody before cast off 3/4 in there. So it's got to be boy run, girls trade, everybody cast off 3/4 Dixie style to an ocean wave.
I would disagree with that, but that's something that would come, that's like saying boys run, girls trade. If I called circulate after that, everybody would circulate. But you are right, depending on how you, depending on how you're calling, dancers could imply, and rightfully so, as Mickey says, that is an implication that the girls are active and the girls are casting off. It's not, I would probably say everybody, just for the clarification's sake of the dancers.
And it should be the singing call, so excuse me?
I just say boys run, chain down the line.
Yeah, well, that's an alternative. Just what I'm saying is the phrasing of delivery on this, and if I were to change that.
No, I like the singing call. I like the routine. I use it too, but I would say everybody cast off 3/4. And that's the tricky part in there, that you fit that into the song, that everybody cast off 3/4.
Yep.
You got to pronounce it the right way. You got to bring it out.
Yeah.
You know,
and like
with the
I
rhythm.
said, other than, you'll notice in here, other than girls start, I would probably say that as well. I would probably say boys to the far end, or things like that, depending on what floor, give dancer hints. None of those dancer, it doesn't say heads lead to the right, circle to a line, left touch a chord. There's not a lot of room in there for words. Here, I would say head square through, 4 hands around, do side do, touch 1/4, scoot back. You know, it could be boys in, girls in, whatever. Boys run right and left through, turn the girl, flutter wheel, pick up the boy, reverse flutter wheel, keep her in prop. I don't have a lot of those lyrics in there. These are prompting lyrics for clarity. And Mickey, you're absolutely right. Anytime you put something in, if it's for clarification and dancer success, use it. It doesn't hurt. There's enough variety in that figure to make that figure interesting.
And I think it's necessary, because you have activated one group, but you want everybody to work. So this is tricky. Sometimes you call, like send us hinge and everybody trade or whatever. Sometimes I get caught myself. Dancers do what I meant to say, but I didn't.
Yep. And
yeah,
like we've had a lot of discussions on those types of choreography, as well as prompting the dancers for success, which is another nuance that adds into why not all figures would fit into all singing calls. When you have something like this, if I called swing through, boys run, girls trade, cast off 3/4, the normal body flow on that trade, because we're going into a 2-face line, would be they would do the cast off with the 2-face line. But depending on where you're dancing, Mickey, you're absolutely correct. Active dancers, looking at it from a caller's perspective, anything that makes it easier for the dancers is going to work better for you as the caller. By adding that, everyone, you've added a new perspective, which means that I cannot have a really, really, really dominant melody line, but I can have a fair melody line and still get away with that. I could not do that in the last song. I could not fit either of those 2 figures into every piece of music just because of what I have to do. We'll come back to that discussion after. Okay. The essence is not all choreography can be picked up and put into any song. This type of choreography with the 4 figures that we got there is what's needed to keep dancers interested and challenged. But as I said, not all the time. You've got to find singing call music, find a good balance of what's familiar and what's different in both the music and in the choreography. It is, now that that's all said, it's perfectly okay to pull figures from one singing call and use them in the next. The same as it's perfectly okay to use one singing call figure on a specific song. El Paso City is a perfect example of that, where changing that figure that's in that song, from 30,000 feet above, I see the desert city down below. That song, if you're not going to use the do paso, dancers that have been dancing a while aren't going to like that song. I saw a caller do that in the States, and he called El Paso City, but he used a completely different figure. And the dancers just stopped dancing. Some of them just started doing the figure that was with the song. It was changing it was almost a sacrilege. The key to all this, what I'm saying, is you've got to find a balance of both music and rhythm and choreography that takes more than just plucking 64 beats and putting it with 64 beats. How you present it is where the key is. And the key is finding that balance, which takes a lot and time and a lot in practice on the part of the callers. I also want to talk about theming. Okay, theming is more than just structuring your evening around Christmas carols and doing all Christmas carols for a Christmas dance. Yes, you can do that, but that's not what theming for the dancers' enjoyment is. Okay, to do it effectively and repeatedly for a caller that calls every week, it's important to be able to theme your tips both musically and choreographically beyond just it's a Halloween theme or a Pirates theme or a Christmas theme. What's meant by this is don't use the same pattern more than once per night. You remember Tina's comment? If I have to listen to Baby Elephant Walk or Popcorn as a pattern one more time, every time that caller gets up, they use popcorn. Oh, I've had enough of it. Okay. You've got to complement your pattern with a singing call that edifies and enhances what the music is. So if you're using a fast, lively patter, okay, you may want to have a moderately relaxing singing call that is upbeat but very familiar to the dancers, both choreographically and musically. If you're using a pattern with a repetitive melody line, you might want to have an upbeat pickup singing call like Rocky Top or something. If you're using a dominant hard instrumental pattern, okay, and it's got a really good instrumental, it's dominant and that instrumentation is going through, you might want to have a singing call. It's a ballad or an older type pickup song that complements the fact that you've got a dominant hard instrumental. If you're using a strong, easy rhythm, low instrumental pattern, which is what most callers use for teaching and workshopping, you want to do the confirmation of your workshop with a good, relaxing melody line singing call. It doesn't have to be slow or fast. It can be either one, but it's a relaxing melody line that they can understand and deal with and use what they've learned. When we talk choreography, you need to theme a focus for your pattern to meet your singing call. So if you want to do, as Yolanda said, when she was doing that, she was focusing on the four ladies chain as a focus. She had a four ladies chain in the opener, the figure, or the middle break, the ending didn't have a four ladies chain because that was enough. She ended it with a four ladies chain over and back. That was enough. And the choreography of the singing call was interesting and comfortable enough, but it still fit in. In her pattern, she would have done a lot of chains from probably different setups and different ways of getting there. You need to pick a movement or a combination of movements and use it for a focus in both your pattern and your singing call. Now, I'm not a good enough caller in my own right to say I can sight call that. And quite frankly, I try never to sight call my singing calls. I applaud those callers that have that ability and still able to keep it interesting. But if you're sight calling your singing calls and you're repeating that figure more than once, you're not sight calling your singing calls. Okay. And that's where a singing call just seems like another pattern with song lyrics at the end of the phrase. If you pull choreography from another piece of music or from a choreographic site such as CedarNet or any of the other ones, you've got to make sure that that choreography that you're going to use is going to fit the music that you're going to use, and you need to practice it with that choreography to make sure you can deliver it correctly. As I said, I like to use only one figure, a maximum of two, depending on the circumstances, in my singing calls. And they feature what I use or what I focused on in my pattern. Not complex, but they feature that movement or that particular sequence. Another thing is consider seriously writing at least 3 of your singing calls after you've been calling for a while. And I don't mean every night, but when you start by using what's known and what works. You've got to develop the skills. After a couple of years, try and make sure you write at least 1 singing call figure a night, then 2, then 3. And you'll find that you'll develop a repertoire of singing calls that is infinitely more flexible and has a lot more variety than just taking the figure that's off the record. Okay. When you do write your own, you've got to check the timing. You've got to check the flow. You've got to dance it from the boy's position, the girl's position, and from both heads and sides to see that they flow. And most importantly, you've got to practice, 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 and more practice before you deliver that. Very, very few callers can just pick up a record and go, yeah, I'm going to do that. Yes, you can with some. They're very, very simple. If you know the tune and everything else and you can fake your way through it. But if you want to give a real polished performance, practice it. All right. Well, that's a lot of material based on a dancer perspective of what we actually do for a living here. As I said, it's a lot of nuances in calling, but if you look at it from a dancer's perspective, they're looking at it as, I've heard that same figure 27 times over the weekend. Give me something new. I'm doing this song, Farewell to Arms. As soon as that first start go, okay, we're going to do a grand square. We're going to follow that with an Alaman left, a weave the ring, and a promenade. And the figure is going to be, and you've only got 4 beats of music into the song. If that happens, if that's fixed for that song, like El Paso City or a few others like that, great. Dancers love it because that's familiar. But if all of your songs become predictable, if you're going to do City of New Orleans as your song, and they already know what figure they're dancing, you may as well just put the music on and stop calling, because you're not doing the dancers any favors. You're not giving them interest. They've already got it memorized. It's just like singing a song to them, walking to the beat. You may as well be out for a walk with a set of headsets on. Let's open the floor to questioning. Mickey, I really do appreciate the comments on the choreography, and they are absolutely important questions. You still with us, Mickey? Yeah, there you are. They are important comments as well. You have to deliver for the dancer enhancement. And anytime you see something that, you know what, that is a little bit better flow than what was there, change it, adapt to it, learn from it. Let's open the floor. Anybody have any questions, comments, queries, points that they would like to discuss? Yes, Joe.
Okay, I guess I'm unmuted. Yeah, I read that person's message, and my first reaction was because they were talking about new music and doing new things, blah blah blah. My first reaction is square dancing is old. Get over it. You know, it's old. We've got to preserve some of our legacy. Okay, now just because a dancer wants new music, that one dancer's description of new music is different than 25 other people's description of new music.
Absolutely.
Do they want Lady Gaga? I'm sorry, but much of this, what I think is new music, is crap. It's rhythmic, maybe. No good lyrics. What are we doing in a singing call if we're doing lyrics that don't mean anything? And some of these songs, they don't mean a thing. Some of the ones I do, I have to change the words to make sense. You know, and especially with new callers, they have a hard enough time just learning a call, a singing call, if we're talking about a singing call. You know, so for a dancer to come up and approach that person and say, you know, you got to get rid of that record. That's old. That's crap. You know, that's junk. That's tough. Not only is it a hobby for the dancers, but for many callers, it's a hobby. There aren't that many of us that make a living at doing this stuff. You know, I'm to the point where I like my music. I have to pick music I like. If the new music is good enough, in my estimation, yeah, I'll use it. But someone else will come along and say, well, that's no good. I don't like that. So, you know, as callers, we really have to use a lot of judgment on our choice for that.
And that's what I was saying in the inception, where we said, when you're looking at music, in your first few years, you're buying practically anything and everything. You hear a caller do something you like, you grab it because for some reason it inspired you or you respect that caller. After about 5 years, you become a little more selective. And after a while, you notice that music is old, but you've raised two very strong points there. One is our music is older because our dancers are older. That to me, that's an entire separate thing that we have to deal with. I look at people like Jeff and Yolanda there that are, you know, under 40 in that age range. Shut up, Yolanda. No, you're not. Okay. Or the person that made this comment who's only 50 and considers themselves a new dancer. But I also look at Mickey out there, who's definitely not under 50. Right, Mickey?
Pardon? I'm 37.
Yeah.
You're talking about my grandfather.
Right. And as is George Burns. But if you look at the dancers and you look at Tina's comments, when Tina was making these comments, there's a lot of new dancers and there's a lot of new younger dancers. It's not about, it has to be Nicki Minaj or it has to be Lady Gaga or it has to be, God help us all, Justin Bieber. It doesn't have to be that music. What it has to have is music that's interesting. And songs like Ghost Riders in the Sky, Rocky Top, Neon Moon, Piano Man, Hallelujah, they're just as popular today as they were 60 years ago. And people know those songs. You put on Ghost Riders in the Sky, almost everybody will join in. You go to a bar and it's karaoke night and you sing that, everybody's going to be rocking and enjoying it, regardless of what their age is. That has to do with the performance and the music. And I'm very much with you, Joe. Music has to appeal to me for me to want to buy it. but how I perform it is what's going to appeal to the dancers. And you also have to remember that new music is, a lot of this stuff is new to them. When you have a teenager that comes home and says, oh, you got to listen to this new group. This is real hard hitting music. This is what music should be, not that old crap that you listen to. Listen to this. And they put on AC/DC.
Yeah.
Okay. 1970s, 1980s. That's new to them. It doesn't have to be wild and funky, but it does need variety. And their excellent point. I wanted to cut that a bit short, opening it up, but we can come back to that. But Mickey had his hand up, and then I've got Guido. Were you done there first, Joe? Were you?
Well, just two other quick things. One is, don't forget that new music today is not about the music. Now, realize I'm coming from a music background. I've been a professional musician for 60 years, not just square dance calling. I play in a lot of bands. I went to school for music. So, when you talk music, it's a different story. Today's music is more about the message and the lyrics generally. So, we have to be very careful of how we choose, as you say, Mel, the music. The other thing had to do with the pattern, because, we're dealing with the whole program.
Yep.
On the pattern, what Mickey mentioned about saying on the cast off 3/4, saying everybody, what's the difference between saying everybody and saying all? It makes a big difference to our how we present the singing or the pattern or the singing call. The same as, do you say circle to the left or circle left? Depends on the music, the instrumentation. If you want to have the dancers dance to the music, say circle left.
Okay.
Let them dance to that music. If you're saying circle to the left, you're taking a lot of precious dance time, music time from the dancer. So, you say it. I think we all agree it takes a lot of work to make a good presentation, and
Yep.
we have to work like crazy on the exact wording, and not just exact wording, but the choice of words. That's about it.
Absolutely. And this is what I was saying with the phrasing. Just how you phrase things with your filler or your dancer explanation changes how you deliver things. I've got Mickey, Guido, and then Steve. So Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, talking about new music, if you have children growing up or youth, and they listen their, I guess it's contemporary music they're listening to with their fellows and whatever, and they for the first time hear a country song, it's a new music to them too.
Yep.
And what I figured out is that if it's presented well, they as well will like it too. What we are talking about now, new music, is that hip hop type thing and techno, whatever, which goes, everything more or less sounds the same, like and then you have some kind of message going, talk about up and down, and then you cut the head square through, and I get for you as well could call on there and have it kind of a rappy. I guess the first raps we did are the callers calling hot hash type thing, or adding filler words to the calls. So and then taking the hits today, very often you have like a popular old song from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or upper famous groups or singers, be it Elvis or whatever, wise men say, and they sing in the background and play the music. Only fools rush in, and then someone would organ say, babe, I'm gonna love you all the time, and whatever, wise man, and you will have it in the background. And so this may be a top hit, but still it is based on old music. And I think we got to be careful with talking about old and new. I think there maybe is good music and bad music. There's music which is danceable for square dance, and we can use it. And in my opinion, there should be a kind of a melodic, recognizable tune there, which distincts from hoedown and pattern music. Very much the so-called modern music, if it is a little bit, I got it cut down and not pimped up, but pimped down a little bit, you may use it very well for pattern music. So on a singing call, I think we need a kind of a melodic, recognizable tune, which can help the dancers to kind of feel the groove and feel the mood. And I think the important thing is what we need is mood in the singing calls. And mood creates the atmosphere, is entertaining people, keeps them there. And that only goes, as I see, with melody and touching the hearts.
Yeah.
I liked what Mickey said, but he was missing a C. He said rappy music. He was missing a C at the beginning.
Of rappy. That said, there is some actual decent music out there.
Yeah,
that's playing.
I didn't.
Oh no, I know, but it's a valid point, and a lot of it is gimmick. And what Mickey said about new music, new to them, it doesn't have to be top of the pops. Like the question, "Fools rush in." Anybody know where that expression comes from? It was the base. It was the aphorism that went to that. Wise men say only fools rush in.
Yes, can't help falling in love with you. That's
yeah. Well, the actually was from an essay on criticism written in 1709 by Alexander Pope, published in 1711. That was the aphorism, and that was "Fools rush in where angel fools to tread." That was where it comes from. It's been taken along the line, but that particular song was what, 1973 or 1970, in that area. I think that Elvis recorded that. So what are we talking? 70, 80, 90, 2000? That's 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And yet
that was the song he used to sing his daughter to sleep.
Yeah, but this is the point I'm making. Now, Glenn Miller's done it, Doris Day's done it, lots of people have done it, Willie Nelson's done it, all sorts of people have done this song. Bye, Masako. Thanks for coming in. When you look at something like that, it becomes popular. The same with the song Ghost Riders in the Sky. Very few people think of Burl Ives when they hear Ghost Riders in the Sky, 1948. They think of Johnny Cash in the 1970s. And it will become popular. Most people don't think of Leonard Cohen when they think of Hallelujah. They think of the movie Shrek, because that's the theme song from Shrek. And now everybody's going to play that in their mind and figure, what is it? And it is. Yeah, it's those kinds of things that make old music popular. But one of the things that Joe said earlier is, yeah, our dancers are older. Well, our dancers are older, not because the music is old, it's because we're not doing something to enhance new dancers. And unfortunately, a second thing, one of the worst things we're doing is we're grabbing new music that's not properly structured, presented, or performed to try and bring in a new dancer, or we'll grab that piece of funky music, Miley Cyrus, Like a Wrecking Ball, and Joe's going to get on the wrecking ball in nothing but a pair of bikini briefs and swing back and forth calling. I can tell you right now, done in a shopping mall, Joe, I don't think you'd draw new dancers, because I know I sure as heck wouldn't if that was me doing it.
I think that would be a song for Brian, because he uses the bikini.
Well, his thighs will make it work.
No,
okay, we'll go to Guido next.
But the thing is that record companies try to buy the music catalogs of the well-established composers like Paul McCartney, Bruce Springsteen, or whatever, or whoever you can find. And they meanwhile start to refuse to have new songs produced. At least the major labels are very reluctant, because new music is for them not sellable. And when it goes to new music, the perception in Germany in the 60s and 70s, we had two guys, a company who was organizing concerts. And one of the associates, Fritz Rau, had a daughter, and his daughter came around 69 or 70, came to him and said, I have got this record of this guy. You should hire him, make concerts. He will fill entire halls. His name is Glenn Miller.
Yep.
And this was a 16-year-old girl in the 1960s or 70s. She had never heard of Glenn Miller, and that he passed away, or, well, I don't know if he passed away. Meanwhile, he probably did. But
He disappeared in an airplane.
he just disappeared above the channel. And so now, old music, new music, I think it's more or less to have a rounded repertoire with different rhythms, with different styles of music.
I have no problem with that. And Guido, what you also said with the production rights, the copyright to getting on, there's not a lot of money. So when a record producer takes a newer song, and I'm talking post 2000, that's usually because that song inspires something in them to want to do it.
Yeah.
If a non-music producer says, I would really like to produce this song, there's one that I would really love to produce, which was written by a friend of mine who's now passed on, and it's beautiful for square dancing. But just to find out, I can't do that because even though he had given me permission to do it, I don't have that in writing. So that belongs to his estate, and I don't even know where to find his estate now. We can't do that because no company would allow that until after a certain time, when the copyright laws say after so much time it becomes open tender, unless somebody Michael Jackson buys it or Disney buys it. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into it. There are a lot of callers today that pull karaoke songs down and they call it square dancing. I really wish they wouldn't, because there's very few of those that actually work well. And there's a lot of callers today that take a song and they just turn it down. You've got the lyrics of the song. They just play the song in the background. I really wish they wouldn't do that either, because I personally hate it, but that's a personal preference. But I will always
I use a lot of the karaoke songs.
I will also say that if you're using that for square dancing, okay, check your copyright laws, because they are different in the States and in Canada and Germany and Australia when you're doing that kind of stuff. And number two, ask yourself, are you calling for the dancers or are you calling for yourself? Some of them work. I will guarantee you that some of them work. I personally don't like it, especially if they've got the song. Like if I pull out a record or a piece of music that has the singer singing, I just turn it down so they can recognize. I start calling on it in the background. To me, I hate that. If you're going to perform, I'm there to hear you. I'm not there to hear you singing over a song that I might want to hear. So, but that's a personal preference, and I will stand by my axiom. If your dancers like it and you're doing right by your dancers and you're filling the halls and they're staying there to the end of the dance, you're doing it right. So not every way is the right way for everybody. And you can see that in what we actually have here. I had Steve Potter with the next comment, and then I've got Roz.
Yeah, I wish I could remember what record it is. I've been recording a bunch of my records to MP3, and one of them I came across.
Make a face like it.
Most of them I have at least heard the song, if not have danced to it. But this one I had not even heard of the song before, and I would say it was probably a late 50s, early 60s song, maybe even a 70s song. And I hadn't heard it at all. And it was a beautiful song. It's like, how come I've never heard this before? And so
do you remember what the lyrics were?
No, I don't remember at all. I have it in my collection now in MP3s, but I have to go back and look which one it was. But it was really, really good record. It was really good music, good song. It's like, wow. I couldn't believe how good it was, and I hadn't heard it.
Yeah, that is actually quite common. If I gave, I'm going to go with a tune right here, and everybody tell me if they recognize the tune. Dee 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 dee. What song is that?
I hate it.
I'll give you a hint.
Breaky Heart.
I'll give you a hint. It's not Achy Breaky Heart, and it's from before 1930.
I've heard that one before.
And it was also released as a square dance record before Achy Breaky Heart came out. It's called We're Gonna Go Hunting Tonight. And it's an old country music song.
Mhm.
So,
regarding the songs you've never heard before, I'm having a slight interest in finding the originals. And on a Blue Star record, Tahitian Holiday, No Chance, or Dancing on the Street by also Blue Star, done by Marshall Flippo.
mhm.
I don't have a chance to find the original of that song. And believe me, I know many songs even back to the 20s. So,
But I think Dancing in the Street, wasn't that Lionel Richie?
No, not this one.
Okay.
Lionel Richie was Dancing on the Ceiling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's probably what he was putting up his nose.
Dancing on the Street was in the 70s by somebody else.
It was Martha and the Vandellas, and then done by Van Halen a little later.
Yeah,
but the Dancing in the Street by Marshall Flippo is a song that's probably in the 40s or 50s, maybe even 30s, and it's very difficult to find. Or Tahitian Holiday. I even wrote an email to who was Blue Star now?
Buddy Weaver.
Buddy Weaver, but he didn't even reply to my question.
Very busy.
Yeah. he could have written back. I don't know, but he didn't do anything.
I'll forward the message to him.
For those of you that are interested, Dancing in the Street is Blue Star 2008.
Yep.
That's the number.
Well, there was another Dancing in the Street with David Bowie.
Yeah, but that's not this one. That's I venture to say that when Dancing in the Street was written, David Bowie was not even born.
Yeah. So if you want to hear the tune, it's actually on Vic Cedar's website. You've got a clip of the tune, but getting the record is on, and that's one that you'd have to contact Buddy to see if he wanted to re-release it. There's a lot of old music, a lot of old vinyl music that is very, very good. I know Bob Elling's doing a lot of it. I know Tracy Brown is doing a lot of. They bought up a lot of these record labels, and they're trying to get the tracks or re-release digital copies to keep this music up.
I just wanted to say, in direct answer to Steve Potter, it's very, very normal that you can have a square dance record where you even haven't heard the song yet. Or one of Chaparral's most famous songs, I Want to Sing. This is a gospel song. There's on YouTube, there's a clip by a Canadian singer, but I haven't found any album with it, nothing. The only reason I could detect it because the Chaparral record has the authors written on it. So it's if you find songs that you never heard in square dance, that might not be unusual.
And I know from some songs, and I think even Wade Driver did some songs which were not music, but they were just done for singing calls. He wrote some songs, and other records also were just square dance versions. If they were composed and the lyrics were made up for a special convention or whatever, or a festival.
Yeah. There is a lot of music that's been redone. We've got Roz next.
Okay. Yeah, the music's very important, but I think also the presentation is really important. What you as a caller do with it individually. we had a birthday recently, and Graham Elliott, who's one of our top callers in Australia, he did New York, New York. He is a caller that's a real entertainer and basically ticks all the boxes. And one of our learners was just blown away by him doing that. And she was in her 50s and she was just amazed and couldn't stop talking about it. But I mean, if I did New York, New York, or John Casey did New York, New York, or Graham did it, you all do it individually. So I think what you do with the music is important as well.
Absolutely. The performance, and this is why I stressed in the presentation, it's not just the fact that the music is new or old. It's not that your choreography is repetitive or varied. Your performance and your delivery is what's going to make that interesting. Your choreography has to be smooth and danceable and not repeated redundantly over and over and over again through an evening. But a good solid performance, regardless of how old or how dated or how brand new and fresh that music is going to make the big difference. Marshall Flippo was a fantastic caller, you know, and the song that you gave, just to give context to what Guido was saying, that song had a new movement in it that was being featured at the time when he recorded that. That movement was Whirl Away with a Half Sachet, which tells you how long ago that song was. It was still called Whirl Away. And that doesn't make the song bad. Now, that's one that you would definitely change the choreography to match today, but there's all sorts of things along that line that you have to consider. And what's going to draw the audience in is your performance. That's the keynote. And your performance can be ruined by, hi, Mickey, I want to come to your dance. And Mickey, I'm going to come to dance to you every night this week in different towns. And Mickey's going to do exactly the same performance with the same song and the same piece of choreography and exactly the same inflection on 5 different shows. I'm not going to go and watch the Mickey Braithwaite show 5 nights a week and pay, you know, $200 to go and watch Mickey perform the same show 5 nights in a row. Now, I know Mickey doesn't do that, which is why I'm picking on him, because Mickey is an exceptional caller. But you get the idea of what I'm saying. He may do the same song once or twice, but it'll be a different performance each night. It affects the crowd, it affects the play. The choreography may be different or it may be the same, but it will still be something that is a little bit different.
I have another. Just
sorry,
about
I've got Guido, then Jeff, and then you, Mickey.
Okay. All right.
I have nothing to say.
Oh, okay. I thought you had your hand up. Jeff, you started saying something, and I cut you off. Jeff Seidel?
No, not me.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Mickey. I guess you are up.
Yeah, and talking about music, old music or whatever, I think the Drei Groschen Oper, it was from, I'm not sure, 1928 or 27 when it was invented. It's Mac the Knife, and it's still popular and played all over the world today. And we can use it as singing calls. So sometimes the instrumentalization or rhythm may vary a little bit, but the song it's almost 100 years old.
Yeah, and
you can use it.
And the reason is everybody remembers Mac the Knife, but nobody remembers Betty the Fork or Cecil the Teaspoon, do they? Now everybody's saying, "What the hell is he talking about?" If an idea becomes popular, it becomes popular, and you can always tell. A good example is a lot of people say, "Oh, country music. Oh, it's old. It's old." Nobody likes country music. You look at the charts and you look at the record purchases. Country music has been here, up, not at the top of the charts all the time, but up in the top third of music sales, music distribution, music records, music performances, best paid performers, all of that stuff. Whereas bands come and go, the popular music. I mean, I dare anybody to name a Justin Bieber song that is in the last 2 years.
He does sing?
Sorry?
He does sing?
Does he?
I don't know.
Okay.
Mm.
How about Nicki Minaj? Very popular. Okay. They're breaking more records than country music than Garth Brooks ever did. But I'll bet you every one of you knows Garth Brooks and can name you about 3 or 4 different songs. So the popularity of music is not a fad. And a good piece of music is one that stands the test of time. Billy Joel's Piano Man is a really, really good example of that. Sing us a song, you're the piano man. That's a beautiful square dance piece of music. That's a beautiful song. Almost everybody knows it. Even if they don't know it, they can sing along with it and they'll remember it next time they hear it. So these are the kinds of things that you have to consider when you're talking music. Popular new is a fad. New to them, but standing the test of time is about performance, and that's why people like it. Ian, you made a comment, when I do calling, I stick to square dance labels. Karaoke modification is not only complicated, it's also illegal. Yeah, that deals with some of the legalities and everything else in whatever country you're in. Some people, I believe it was it you, Steve, or was it? I think it could have been Steve, but I could be wrong on that. But some people actually buy the karaoke music. It might have been you, Brian. Yeah, they buy the karaoke music because they do that as well. And if they own the rights to that and they bought that, there's nothing that says they can't do square dance music too. I can go to a karaoke hall and I can change the lyrics. I do whenever I do the song Green Green Grass at home all the time. Okay, but if they bought the music, they can use it how they want. But just to take a piece of music or karaoke music or borrow it from some way, that one's a no-no. I've got a few hands up here, so I'm going to go in order of the hands that I've got up, which I have Brian and then Guido. So go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so yes, the thing about music is that it's very subjective. Like you in order to perform something well, you have to yourself enjoy it and appreciate it. And so most of the music that I use for patter these days, anyways, is all karaoke music. Because I'm not really big on the boom chuck country music at all, or the boom chuck patter music. But I do have a bunch of sort of modern. When I say modern, they're within the last 10 years, I would bet, songs that are now karaoke songs. The site that I go to is called karaoke-version.com. And on that site, it's nice because you can actually get a version of the song without the background vocals, because a lot of the karaoke songs are ruined by the background vocals that just show up somewhere midway through the song. And so it's nice that you can actually purchase them separately, and they're only about $2.99 each or something, or $3 each for these songs. I don't modify them because again, that's not kosher. It's not actually legal to do so. But I just take the songs and use them for patter, and I've got a very large list of songs that I use, and they are fairly popular.
Question for you. Do you go on the popularity of the song, or do you go on the danceability of the music?
Danceability of the music.
Okay, so
whether or not they will work with my cadence as a caller.
Yeah. Now this is one of the things that's very important. There are a lot of songs. I can't remember the name of the song, but come down the backstretch. Here comes it's a song racing down the backstretch. I can't remember the name of the song right now, even though I did record a version.
The race is on.
The race is on. Thank you. That is a really, really good, strong rhythm beat. Unfortunately, the beat on that is 162 or 152 beats per minute.
Right.
Okay. And that's where it was recorded as a square dance song too, was at 152 beats per minute. It is absolutely horrid to dance to, but it's a great song.
Right.
Now, what Brian is saying, and I still stand by this axiom, there's a lot of callers, Brian, you're not one of them, but they like a piece of popular karaoke music. They get it, or they strip the vocals off it and they use it as it is. And they're just calling patter over it. It doesn't match the danceability of the music. It doesn't. Brian is quite careful in making sure that there is a danceable beat, and it is in either 2/4 or 4/4 timing. It may not necessarily be a boom chuck, but it's in that 2/4, 4/4 timing carried by either the instrumental or by the rhythm melody line. And it's between that 124 to 130 beats per minute, where I know Brian calls that. It's in that range generally. Nothing wrong with that. He buys the music, he uses the music. But
So let me give you
a lot of callers don't.
Let me give you an example if I can, or I'll see if you guys can hear this.
Okay, so 17, that's 126. Okay,
the interesting part that this is boom chuck.
I was just going to say that. Okay. Brian. Okay, when you're playing your music, your mic cut out. But the things I noticed on that, 126 beats per minute.
Yeah, I had to switch it out.
That's a 1970s disco.
Yes.
And it is very, very solid 2/4 rhythm with a 4/4 backbeat and a solid boom chuck, not done with the beats, but done with the instrumental, because it's a staggered beat where you've got a 2/4 switching to a 4/4 on a downbeat, but it's still a boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck.
Right. But
very
it's
strong, but it's something different.
But it's George Michael from the 90s, I believe.
Yep.
So, but yeah, and I've got a bunch of songs very similar to that. But I'm not. Well, when I say boom chuck, I'm probably complaining more about fiddle. I'm not really big on fiddle music.
Old time country fiddle, which is the stereotype of what a lot of people say. It's great.
Right. So yeah. So that song is "Outside" by George Michael, and it's readily available. But there's a whole bunch of other ones that I use and get great people like it. Although I do run into the occasional dancer who just looks up and said, "That's not country," and they hate it, and they don't want to hear any of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, as one songwriter said, you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself.
You gotta have a fiddle in the band.
This is why it's so important to have not just eclectic, but a wide range of musical styles. There's nothing wrong with country. There's nothing wrong with disco. I like disco music, and I'm weird that way.
The funny thing is with disco music, it is music made in a disco, and it is made for making the people dance. And if it was not a danceable music, they wouldn't play it at a disco. Because why did they want to have the people dance in a disco? To get thirsty and to consume drinks. And as funny as it is, when they developed techno as a dancing beat, which was designed in a university, the first techno type thing came from university when they made surveys and observation at what beat would the people start tapping the feet and going out to dance and move their body. And it was about between 126 up to 132 beats per minute. And that has always been what we've been doing in square dancing.
Yeah.
This is
techno. Techno itself was a mathematical. Sorry.
It was
there's a slight delay here.
Right. Yeah. And later it got faster and heavier and whatever, just like everything else. But funny is that they researched how can we get the dancers out there and make them rave and dance at what beat, at what tempo, and not to make them exhausted, but to have them continuously out on the floor. And that's exactly the type of level and beats we're having in square dancing and what we're doing over hours.
Techno music was a university mathematical algorithm designed as a social experiment, which was a follow-on tag onto disco to see what the effects were on the human condition and what would create different reactions. Unfortunately, and I say that with all personal opinion, unfortunately it became a fad, very much as music writing today became a pat formula rather than an individual style. And you'll see most of your top 10 hits, fit into a mathematical formula today on music. This is where your boy bands and everything else, it wasn't about the music, it was about the formula and delivering that presentation for short-term big profit sales. Techno was one of those unfortunate realities that stuck with us. I'm going to cut you there, Mickey, because Guido's had his hand up for quite a while.
I've got 2 points. When it comes to boom chuck music, even Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller did play boom chuck, but it's on a different level because they have when you listen to swing music, you have that boom chuck clearly, but it's it takes twice the time as the regular country boom chuck. And the second point, when the initial point where I raised my hand, when you take a karaoke song and want to modify it, it's legal in most countries to modify the karaoke song. It's just not legal to save that. You can do it live.
Yeah,
if you
that's
have
the lyrics.
No. If you have a DJ software where you can modify the song in its structure live on stage, that's legal. But you cannot save it and have it legal.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, the music laws differ from place to place to place.
Yeah.
So these are things that you have to be very careful in when you're dealing with that type of
that's
music.
why I say in most countries it's okay if it's done live. So if somebody let's have an agent here and he plays that song and the song is unaltered and you're on stage and you modify it while playing, that's okay. Because you have not altered the song, you have not altered the recording. That's an important part, that you don't alter the recording. But if you play back, if you play it live on stage and alter it, then it's in most countries that is legal.
Yep.
Yeah, and with a lot of the square dance music studio song or programs, basically you can adjust the tempo for a song and it'll save that in its own configuration. It doesn't actually save it as the original song. So every time you play it, it'll play it with the configuration that you had set for it, but it actually doesn't change the original song itself.
And if you have a software called Tractor, for instance, as a DJ software, you can lay a map over it and play part A, play part B, play part B, then play back to part A, then go to part C, whatever, and you can jump around the piece of music. But it's a layover. It's not changing the song. If you play the song with any other player, it's just a regular song. That is important.
To simplify that, though, when you play live, it's no different than someone singing the national anthem and they do a really lousy job. You know, so you can do any of this live, change it as you want. It's legal. It's but you know, it's just you might be a lousy singer. What they can't arrest you for that. Well, they could maybe.
Yeah, they should in some cases.
Yeah.
Okay. Two points that have come out. One in particular, the classification of boom chuck. Okay, what people consider boom chuck music, that definition has changed quite a bit. And when we still talk about boom chuck music for square dancing, we still tend to make the reference to a piece of country music, a piece of modern music, or a piece of relative country rock type of music that's got that boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck. So you've got a defined downbeat, you've got a defined upbeat. But the reality today is when we talk about boom chuck, what we're talking about is a 2/4 beat. And if it's got a 2/4 beat between the 122 and the 132, in that range is what we're talking about square dance music, depending on your audience and your drive. 124 to 128, 130, that's your comfortable range. 124 to 128 is where I like to call in that range. The other side of the music is the 4/4 beat. 4/4 beat, which is the boom, 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 boom. You hear that, you just hear the downbeat. You don't have the chuck or the boom chuck, boom chuck. A a lot of people say that is slow. It's a ballad type thing. Yes, it is slow. It is a ballad, but it's also quite fast for dancing if you're not paying attention. The song Hallelujah is a classic example. That's a 4/4 beat, but that is not a slow song to dance to. It's a slow song to sing because of where it is. But there's also a lot of fast songs that have a 4/4 beat. So just be aware of that kind of stuff in your music. Don't get hooked into boom chuck means old time country, old time fiddle. What we're actually talking about is beat ratios and tempo.
Yeah.
Joe, you had your hand up, and I think it's about the music. Have I got that right or wrong?
Well, partly right. It's actually hallelujah is an 8-beat phrase. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. But 6/8 music is usually divided for our music for square dancing into 2 beats per measure, which goes back to boom chuck, boom chuck. 4/4 is it's boom chuck 2, 3, boom chuck 2, 3, boom chuck 2, 3. It's a different thing, but one of the things that Guido might be interested in is Riverboat Jig by Riverboat Records. Whoever put that together worked very, very hard and very smartly. Riverboat Jig is done in, again, an 8-beat phrase pattern. It's what makes people want to dance. It's just so powerful. But the historic part of it is it was music from J.S. Bach back in the 1700s. Jesu, Joy of a Man's Desiring. And here we are, we're playing it, and many, many dancers love that. If you can do a little bit of patter in the first part of it and then hit the grand square where the rhythm changes, you'll have the dancers for the rest of your life. It's a fantastic piece of music. But again, it relates back to that boom chuck, boom chuck. The boom, it just works. Even disco, you can put that down to boom chuck. Works beautifully.
Mhm.
I was just looking for that. You don't have the label number of that one, do you?
Riverboat Jig. Yeah, I can get that. Something like 468, maybe.
I'm just looking it up now.
In fact, I can play it off my.
There's Riverboat Swing. There's Riverboat Jig. Oh, come on.
Okay, let's see if I've got it here. Riverboat. Whoops, come here. Riverboat Jig is 355.
Riverboat 355.
Yeah.
That's just for anybody that was actually looking at interested.
So basically, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, and there are a lot. If this is one of the other things that goes into music. One second, Guido.
Don't get me going on 6/8.
I was just about to say that.
6/8 and 12/8 beats, rhythms played in square dance tempo are actually nothing but a 4/4.
Or a 2/4.
2/4
or
4/4. Yeah. It's
really
an extended. Yeah, it's an extended phrase of the beat, but it fits into that 2/4.
The beat is nothing but triplets, and the emphasis is on one of the triplets, and
as the
square
downbeat,
dancers
yes.
don't dance on the triplets. They dance on the beat. So a famous example is Rhythm Records Sailing.
Mm-hmm.
The Stewart song.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of them, and people talk about rhythm and beats. Most music has that pretty much structured around an 8-beat phrasing somewhere along the line. You may have to repeat a 3-beat phrasing to get to the metering. You may have to repeat 6-beat to get to that phrasing in order to find that. There is also music out there that's on 5 and 7-beat phrases. It's very odd. It's usually from different nations. There's some of the European Slavic music like that. There's a lot of older African music that is structured like that. But I am not a music guru. I'll defer to Joe on this. I've just done a little bit of background research and digging when I was trying to learn this kind of stuff. If you, regardless of what it is, if there's square dance music out there that's in 3/4 time, I'll tell you that as well. There's square dance records that have been recorded in 3/4 time. My personal opinions are absolutely horrid to dance because that's a waltz beat. And because the beat is so dominant, you want to move to the beat. It makes it very difficult to do square dance choreography.
Oh, you have to dance
So,
differently.
yeah, you have to dance very differently and very uncomfortably because it's not what you're trained. Regardless of what it is, what you use, be aware that the dancers get the downbeat, and you want to try and give them that first beat of the phrase, the first beat of the movement, or where it comes in. If you 16 beat phrases or 8 beat phrases or 4 beat phrases, regardless of what it is, if you're doing a movement like heads square through 12 beats and you got a 16 beat phrase, you want to get that square through so that they get that movement. But the next movement's got to be given to them so that they get that downbeat. Beat number 13 is the start of their next movement, which is the downbeat. You've got to make sure that you phrase it and time it so that they're dancing on the beat of the music, regardless of whether it's 2/4, 4/4, 6/8, modified, disco music, funk, or even if it was done by a caller recently, done a cappella, carries that melody line up the beat with their own voice doing it. There's all sorts of things like that. Just be aware of it. Steve, you got your hand up.
Yeah, we did my clogging group, we did a show for a TV station in San Antonio. And we were doing it on the Arneson River Theater. And they say, we understand y'all dance to classical music. And it's, yeah, we danced to Hooked on Mozart from the Hooked on Classic album. And they pulled out some music that was Viennese waltz. And it's like, don't work.
Well, it could, but it's, when you're into that, you're more into a very, very slow polka.
Viennese waltz don't work because it's too fast.
Yeah. Michael.
You're muted. You can talk to a turned off microphone all day.
They have worked out Tennessee Waltz as a square dance version on Sting Records, which works very well. That's just regarding the waltzes, but I wanted to say something else about music and country music and boom chuck, whatever, going forth and back. I think it depends on how the music and the songs are arranged with what instruments and whatever. And there's a lot of, what is country music, what is pop music, and there's a lot of crossover. And just some of the famous songs taken, I Will Always Love You. It's done by, what was her name? In Bodyguard, Whitney Houston. Very famous, made it very popular.
Yes.
But the original version song was written by Dolly Parton. And it was in another movie with Burt Reynolds, A Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Yeah, but
right?
she wrote it before that even. She wrote it for Porter Wagner.
Right. So
when she left the Porter Wagner show.
And there's another one which got very famous with Robbie Williams, If Tomorrow Never Comes.